Welcome back, everybody. I'm John Mello. I'm the founder of PayHouse. We build apps primarily using Bubble.io, which is a development platform. And on the side, I'm also creating an app for Bubble freelancers to find clients, scope work, and get paid. I'm also putting together content like this, where I'm live streaming on Twitch and uploading the clips to YouTube to kind of talk about the struggles that I go through as an agency. And I think that other people are also experiencing. A lot of the people that I talk to, they have very similar problems. A big one that everyone seems to kind of like have a problem around is pricing yourself. How do you price yourself as a Bubble freelancer? And it is tricky. It is definitely tricky. I struggled with it I'm still learning the best way to do it, but I've definitely come a long way in the 3 years that I've been doing this now. I started in 2020. I started freelancing proper in early 2020. So I guess that's around a little over 2 years. I want to talk about the problems that the common methods and the problem with those methods, and then talk about the way that I've done it that has made my life a lot easier. So the first thought that everybody has, I think, when they start freelancing for Bubble is just to bill an hourly rate. And I think that's the easiest to understand. It's the easiest to get started. But there's a lot of pitfalls with billing hourly. First off, setting your hourly rate is kind of weird. Coming to that number is tricky. But that's not even the rate. You may as well just pick a number out of a hat in the beginning, because you really don't know what people are going to react to. I guess it kind of depends on your experience, but there really isn't a standardized like Bubble thing that says you have this much experience that you can charge a certain rate. So it's kind of arbitrary. The hourly rate that you set for yourself is kind of arbitrary. That's not where I think the biggest problem is, though. I think the biggest problem with hourly is, when are you on the clock? When are you actually working, right? Because if you are like hands on the keyboard developing, most people think like that's when I should be billing. That, like if it's that strict, then okay. But there's a lot more to it than that. First off, when I'm doing this kind of work, I'm not just hands on the keyboard the entire time. A lot of the time I am, but I get up, I walk around, I go look out the window, and that's usually when I like a solution to a problem kind of clicks in my head, when I'm not trying to focus on it so much. So like, should I be charging for that time that I was looking out the window? I don't know. Probably not. If I told the client that, they'd be like, why would you, like you weren't working, right? Is it really working if you're not typing on your keyboard? I don't know. Now, the other thing with that is that, like, also with meetings, are you going to bill your client every time you have a meeting with them? Are you charging them for that? Maybe. Are you charging them for every email that you send? That's all kind of built into this concept of paying for your time, right? Which is a very like industrial revolution way to think about work, right? As a culture, this is the easiest way to think of an hourly rate, but for this type of work in this context, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Your clients don't pay you for the amount of time it takes you to do something. They're paying you for the amount of time it would take them to do it. That's the difference. And I think that's the more fair way to think about it, because think of all the time that you put in to learn this, to do it in 5 minutes, versus somebody who's just starting out. It may take them 3 days to do. Should you be paid less? That doesn't make sense. You already put that time in. So try to shift that. I think that shift in thinking was pretty essential for me in thinking about don't hourly, to kind of rule out hourly as a viable option to charge clients. Now, this does change depending on what type of client you're working with. If you are working with somebody that is completely non-technical, they have no designs, no concept of how apps works, they just have an idea that they're telling you, that's going to be very different from working with a client that maybe already built their MVP and just needs an extra pair of hands in Bubble. You may get away with an hourly rate with that kind of thing. Maybe, again, maybe. So moving off of hourly now, those are some of like the struggles of billing hourly, right? I don't like it because again, it doesn't suit for the way that I work. I find this work to be very creative. It's think of like, and I don't liken myself to a painter or anything like that, but this is a creative process. And I don't think that you could really accurately bill for, something that's creative. You would, and also it kind of messes with your head when you know that you're on the clock as a developer. It actually stifles like creative thinking and problem solving because you're mindful of the clock as opposed to the problem that you're solving. So hourly, don't like it. Some people do it. Some people swear by it. That's okay. Everybody's different. I don't like it. The second method is just a fixed rate for the entire project, right? Client comes to you with an app idea. You say, all right, client, I'm going to scope this out, estimate a time frame and a cost, how much and how long, based on what we've spoken about. I've done that too. Here's why I don't, and I think the benefits of doing that is that like it gives a very clear timeline to the client. The client feels good. Ooh, okay, it's going to take 3 months and it's going to cost me $6,000. Okay, the client feels good. Here's what normally happens in those situations, though. First off, you'll get, I want to say a week in and realize one feature that you thought was going to be easy is going to take a lot more work than you initially anticipated. It may be that you built this before, something similar, but a slight tweak in what the client is asking for in this use case is going to alter that pretty significantly. So that messes up your timeline. And now you're doing work to kind of compensate for that. You're doing work that you're not really being paid for. So you're kind of in a bind. You promised the client that you were going to deliver X, X, and X. You realize that, well, it's really, I thought it was going to be, take me this long and cost this much, but it's going to be a lot more than that, I can see. And now your other features get backed up and you kind of just feel like you're behind all the time because you kind of promised that you were going to do this. That's honestly what happens a lot of the time when you try to scope a project out from beginning to end and provide a fixed budget. You're probably in almost like 99% or 90% of the time, you're probably going to be undercharging. You're probably going to be underbilling yourself because you can't foresee the roadblocks that you're going to come into in the beginning. Aside from that, the client may change their mind midway about what they want. Maybe they found out some new information. That's not, this could be their fault, but it's not really a blame game at that point. The reality is the needs of whatever app you're building are going to change as new information comes in, whether that's through feedback, whether that's through some other company that's doing something similar and maybe they learned and they want it and the client is watching them. All of these things change at the drop of a dime, and your development timeline and process is going to change with that. It has to be a flexible process. So how can you possibly estimate an entire budget from beginning to end at the beginning when you have so little information and made so many assumptions about how people are going to use the app and what problem you're solving from them? It is not, it's another thing that I've done. I don't like it. I've messed it up. I've way underbilled myself. And that's when you kind of get this feeling of being trapped into a project because you promise something that you really, you're not sure if you're going to be able to deliver. You feel bad about yourself. The client is frustrated because they're not seeing the progress maybe that they would have liked. It's a mess, right? So hourly, fixed rate for an entire budget. This is what happens. These are the things that happen. Again, I've done this. I've done it myself. This is why I know the pitfalls here, is because I've messed this up myself. Again, over the past 2 years of doing this bubble freelance work, I have made these mistakes. So I'm trying to explain why this doesn't work. Now, the other third option that is not as obvious, a development block. Let's just call it that for now. It's just, think of it, a block is the same thing as a scope, where a client has a general idea of the new feature that they want to build. We're talking about a pre-existing app at this point. You may be starting from the ground up. Normally, I charge $2,500 to create a clickable user interface that's responsive and just, like clickable, like they can navigate through it, and it's responsive depending on what the client needs. So that's one that I've kind of like, all right, I kind of know what's involved here, especially with Bubble's new responsive engine. I can pretty much estimate how long it's going to take me to build the user interface. The key there is getting, kind of the branding and all the colors and stuff that the client wants beforehand. If they have like a Figma design of what they're looking for beforehand, all the better. Now, once we have that, then we're going to get into the highest priority features, right? What features do the clients want to build? What features do the clients want to build for their app? First, what's the highest priority stuff? What solves the problem the best? And then we start talking about, okay, let's just use an example, video conferencing, right? In the last, I want to say, I have never implemented video conferencing until this last application or this last development block that I did with a client. So I didn't know what that effort was really going to be like. So what we did was we just said, look, let's create a working statement of work, a working SOW, right? And we're going to add video conferencing to that. Let's get through that. We're going to build that. Let's see. Sorry, I'm jumping all over the place. They pay a deposit, right? So they pay that deposit. I charge $2,500 per development block, and I asked them for the half of it, 50% of that, $1,250 to get started. Right. So that's just the way that we do that. Now, once we have that first thing that we're working on, we're going to say, okay, I'm going to implement video conferencing into this app. I go and do that. I go and build it. I see, I haven't really committed to even completing this as of yet. It's just kind of like, all right, we're going to see what kind of effort this is. We're going to implement this, and then we're going to move on to the next thing. Assuming now from what, as you're going through it, you kind of learn like, all right, this is going to be this much effort. And it's going to take me, it took me collectively like 4 development hours to build. Okay. Now I kind of know, right? That thing is done. The client is happy because they've seen some progress. You delivered on the feature that you said you were going to deliver. Now, depending on how much effort that really was, I can either close that block and say, look, that was 2,500. In this case, it isn't. Like, video conferencing wasn't that difficult to implement. There's a few other features that I'm going to include in this block, but then you see what that effort is, and then you kind of move on to the next thing. Next thing is going to be deactivating jobs or something if you're doing like a job board app. So you keep doing that until the effort that you've put in and the value that you've delivered to the client is worth that $2,500. That's how I've been doing it, right? And again, this is it. I will agree that this is a little bit hard to explain going forward for a client, especially who wants just a how much and how long answer to things. And that's when you kind of have to launch into a conversation around, look, this is development is kind of an iterative process. We don't know what roadblocks are going to come into. We don't know what information you're going to get and maybe change what it is that you need or are asking for. Why don't we just take this one step at a time, right? But when you explain it like that, they kind of back off from like, oh, how much and how long to like, all right, I'm not committing too much here to this developer, right? It's just a small like first step. If they don't like me or if I don't like them, I can go away from them after we've completed this development block, however many features, right? So that is what I find to be the way to do it. And it's worked for me. It's worked for my clients. My clients are never really asking me like, hey, John, where are we with this? Because I'm providing them with constant updates and they see this progression from day one. What will happen, how much and how long, that question almost doesn't make sense anymore because we're learning together about the way that this app is going to be built, what features we're going to add and change based on the user feedback that we're getting. Then we just keep, and it's a steady from the developer side, it's a steady stream of income, right? So you're like naturally just getting more work because the client is asking you, the client is asking for more and more features. And on the client side, they're seeing progress. They're seeing the actual progress. It's not like they're waiting around for 3 months while you complete a whole entire feature set that you scoped out from the beginning. And then you go, here's your app or not, or this feature, this is going to be another 6 months or another 3 months, whatever. So they're seeing progress straight away. You can turn on the dime if you need a new feature set, and if the client changes their mind about what they're asking for, and you're also getting steady work, steady income, and you're not feeling overwhelmed. So this is what's worked for me. So I picked up another user from last week, right? So my progress here is on the bottom, 45 users. I picked up another one this week, so 46, 23 pieces of feedback that I'm working through, 31 mom tests across, I want to say like 20 countries here, which is pretty cool. Most of them, the big chunk of them in the US, but it is a pretty global perspective here. I added El Salvador next week. So I'm talking to bubble freelancers in all of these countries, people that are trying to get started or already have a agency or working in Bubble. And then 56 Twitch followers, no progress there. So this is my snapshot of the progress for this week. If you're watching this on YouTube, try and join the live stream, twitch.tv/bubblehack. I'm streaming every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I want to get that conversation going around how people are finding their first 1,000 users in an app that they're building, or just more generally about bubble freelancing and how people are doing that. All right. I will catch you all next week. Thank you.